With me, Zara Janjua. Coming up between now and 10, we'll be reflecting on the upcoming third anniversary since the first national COVID lockdown. In the years since, we have been searching for the silver linings to the dark clouds that changed our lives irreparably. So, how much have these things come to pass? Has that community spirit remained? What has the pandemic changed about people's relationship with faith, and how has our mental health been impacted? Plus, now that many people are working from home a lot more, how can we get the most from our minds? Then later in the programme, we'll be celebrating Mother's Day in a world where thousands of opinions are right at your fingertips. How can mums trust their own instinct? And if you've ever watched a video by the YouTuber Mr. Beast or any of the many influencers sharing philanthropy content, then stay tuned. I'll be asking if charitable acts can ever be totally selfless. First though, yesterday marked 6 years since the death of this rock and roll icon. It's Chuck Berry and Johnny B. Goode. Well, I hope that woke you up. That was the late, great Chuck Berry and Johnny B. Goode. Now, this Thursday sees the third anniversary of the first COVID-19 lockdown, which will be marked by a national day of reflection to remember those who died. Back then, we didn't know what was ahead of us or how long it would last. It impacted on every area of our lives, and society had to adapt in a way it never had before. So over the next hour, we'll be reflecting on what has changed in those 3 years. Where are we in terms of the effects the pandemic has had on all of us? We'll be delving deeper into some of these subjects shortly, but first, let's have a look at what the data is telling us. In 2020, the British Academy was asked by the UK government to produce an independent review on the long-term societal impacts of COVID. And Professor Christina Boswell from University of Edinburgh, who's also Vice President of Public Policy at the British Academy, joins me now. Hello, Christina.
Hello, Zara. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here with us. Now, the role of the British Academy is to answer the big questions really around this. Can you tell us what answers you and your colleagues have discovered?
So this was quite a major, wide-ranging report which looked at the long-term impacts of COVID on society and communities. And the report looked at three main aspects. So one was health and well-being, how the pandemic had affected those in the long term. The second was communities, culture and belonging. So really how this had affected connectivity and the lives of people in cities and towns, in rural areas, families and social networks. And the third area was in terms of knowledge, employment and skills. So how it had affected education and training, work and labour. And the report, not surprisingly, which was published in 2021, found really wide-ranging and quite serious negative effects across those three areas. And in particular, a key finding running through the report, which will not surprise listeners, is the really substantial effect on inequalities. So COVID both exacerbated pre-existing inequalities across many dimensions, and it also created new inequalities.
And so can you tell me a bit more about those inequalities? Who was affected mostly, really, when this happened?
Yeah, I mean, so if you think firstly about the economic effects, so a number of sectors were largely shut down with wide-scale layoffs and people placed on furlough. And those economic effects most radically affected lower income groups and therefore exacerbated inequalities across different socioeconomic groups and different parts of the country. Key workers were particularly affected, of course, and more vulnerable to the virus. The closure of schools placed particular pressures on young people and also their parents, and often produced severe mental health problems because children lacked social connectivity, were facing isolation, didn't have physical exercise, often didn't have the same nutrition that they would have had if they'd gone to school, and were in domestic situations which were often very stressful. And parents were often very stressed at the implications of homeschooling and having their kids at home. And then, of course, there were the health and mental health effects more broadly, and those tended to affect more acutely, as we know, those with underlying health problems and those with pre-existing mental health problems. And all of these problems were felt much more acutely by those in more deprived communities, those already facing economic stress and pressures, and often women, and those from ethnic minority groups, and the over 70s with underlying health conditions. So we really saw this kind of ramping up of pre-existing inequalities across many groups.
And this study obviously it's really looking into the last 3 years, really, because of course we are still very much in the pandemic. But these inequalities you mentioned, they began to surface at the very height of the pandemic. How long will we feel those effects?
Well, we call the report the COVID decade. So we would expect these effects not just to sort of be coterminous with the pandemic itself, but to last quite long after the pandemic. But of course, it really depends. You have to sort of unpack a little bit the different types of effects and who's suffering most from them. And so there will be differences in terms of how long that might last. So for some individuals who say whose business went bust or who suffered acute health or mental health problems or other major effects of the pandemic, that could really last years and years. It could be quite long-term effects. In terms of the broader societal effects, well, much really depends on the interventions, what we do now to try to mitigate some of those effects on particular communities and particular social groups.
Thank you so much, Christina. Now you're going to stay with us, but also joining me is author and Quaker Alistair McIntosh, who we've been keeping in touch with throughout the pandemic, and Professor Liz Grant, a co-director at the University of Edinburgh's Global Compassion Initiative and Assistant Principal of Global Health. Alistair, Liz, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Alistair, do these findings align with your personal experience of the pandemic?
Well, I'll say to Christina, I am hugely relieved and delighted to hear what you've just reported, Christina, because on Thursday night last week, knowing I was going to be on this programme and discussing it with your producer, I was at a community meal here in Govan with one of our local organisations, the Galgale Trust, which is engaged with people, many of whom are living hard-pressed lives and in poverty. Mm-hmm. And there were about 40 of us around the fire at night having a shared community meal. I put the questions to them. What should I be saying on the BBC this morning? And in short, everything that you have just said about exacerbated inequality, about it falling heavily on the poor was corroborated. And indeed, angrily so, because people were aware of things like Partygate. They were saying it's one rule for the rich, one rule for the poor, but it is us who are carrying the weight.
So, Alistair, your experiences do very much align with those in the report and the experiences of those you've been speaking to. You mentioned at a community meeting in Govan. Liz, do these findings align with your experiences too?
Absolutely. And as you say, what COVID did was shine a light on the existing inequalities, which all of us have got to recognise we're part of. And then it amplified it, exacerbated, it made it so much worse. And inequalities is the word that we hear and we see. But I want to say, thinking behind inequalities, what do inequality means? What does it mean? It means people are suffering. People across the UK, across Scotland, across the globe are suffering because they are not having access to things that others have access to. They are being disadvantaged in some way. So it's thinking much more broadly about how do we take the words of the report and the recommendations and actually for all of us to put into place a different sort of future, a different sort of present.
Mm-hmm. Christina, I'll come back to you on this one because both Alistair and Liz have mentioned inequality there. That was a recurring theme really in all the sectors you reviewed.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's interesting that one of the factors which to some extent mitigated some of the worst effects of COVID is related to how communities mobilised. And we saw that, voluntary organisations, faith groups, mutual aid groups and charities and social enterprises were often the first port of call for people who needed food or medicine or just connectivity, who were isolated. And I think the challenge there is that actually those sorts of infrastructures are not spread equally either. So not only are the effects unequally spread across the country and across different groups, but also the capacity to mobilise local communities in that way. I mean, it did happen to some extent everywhere, but those communities that are better resourced, that have digital connectivity, the WhatsApp groups, the Facebook groups and so on, and that have the good connections to charities and social enterprises and so on, they're better equipped to then pick up some of the worst stresses and challenges of these sorts of issues. So I think one of the key things, I mean, Liz was talking about, what do we need to do to address this? We've got to build up strength in those local infrastructures, ensure digital connectivity for all groups in society, and also make sure that we invest, that we provide enough resource for local groups and charities to thrive across the whole country, not just in the more privileged areas of it.
Alistair, it sounds like you are still very connected with the communities you live in. To take you back to the height of the pandemic, that had a huge effect on your own mental health. And these impacted in a very unequal way, as we've heard, across society. Were you conscious of that inequality at the time?
It was an emergent consciousness, because one of the things about lockdown is that there were people you simply lost touch with, especially if they didn't have internet or if they couldn't afford to keep their mobile phone thing going. So, the first real consciousness I had of it was when two of our people lost their lives in tragic circumstances. And we had a kind of open-air funeral in a local wood, about a dozen of us suitably distanced, made a fire. And people spoke of the profound depths of loneliness. What's it like to be locked up in a flat with your abuser? The community centres were all closed. On Thursday night, a woman from Puzzle Park, which is a hard-pressed area in Glasgow, was in tears as she was saying, the churches were closed, the libraries were closed, community centres are closed. Many have not reopened since then, but these were places where people would go to get warm, to get food. They couldn't go there. People were coming up, children were coming up saying, I'm hungry, I've not eaten, and my ma hasn't eaten either. So what this points to is the imperative of pumping resources not into luxuries for the well-to-do, but into basic necessities for living and basic necessities of togetherness. And one last thing there, Community Land Scotland, the organisation that networks Scotland's 480 land trusts, carried out a fascinating study. And they found that where people were in control of the land, they had the local infrastructure, they knew each other, they trusted each other, they had the telephone directories, and they were quickly able to put into place community support structures.
Thank you, Alistair. I know that for many people, they will remember at the height of the pandemic and within their own communities that many had been galvanised to action, that in fact it did impact the community spirit positively. Liz, what did we learn about compassion during the pandemic?
Well, thank you for asking that, because I think that compassion may seem very, very far away from all the discussions of COVID as a pandemic, and yet throughout the period, particularly the periods of lockdown, we saw compassion in action in a way that was remarkable. And if we reflect back, you remember the times when in the supermarkets, people were buying, shopping for NHS workers. We're getting little signs. People were going to their neighbours, checking if they were okay. People were coming out on the streets on a Thursday evening just to be together, to recognise the power of what the NHS was doing. And it was that sense that there was a communal compassion, a sense that we were together. And the other thing I think that the pandemic did, and it's quite frightening when you think about it, was, and positive as well, was that it showed and allowed people to be compassionate. And I wonder what's happening, because compassion, and if I can say, because it's a part of my work, compassion, that word, it means, if you look at the Latin, the Old English, the French, the com and passio, the being together, the com and the passion, suffering. So it means being with suffering, being together with suffering. Suddenly, because we were as a nation together with suffering, we were able to take steps. And it was as if we all had permission to be the people we wanted to be, to care for each other much more proactively than staying in our houses, being individual and not speaking and not acting. Because compassion is, fundamentally what drives every human being. It's what makes us a common humanity.
I mean, Alistair, Liz just said there that, this period showed and allowed people to be compassionate. What was the spiritual impact of the pandemic? As a Quaker, what part of your faith played at that particular time?
Well, Sarah, what Liz has just explained is the spiritual impact. The spiritual impact is about love in action. God is love, the three most important words in the Bible. And I'm thinking, just after our discussion at the Galgael the other night, I was with a friend, Rusty, from my own village, Lurbost, in the Isle of Lewis. And Rusty's a source of all wisdom. So I said to him, how did it affect things back in the village, Rusty? He said it was a rekindling of community. We realised how much we needed each other. And what's more, it has carried on since then. We're keeping that up. So people the other night were talking about deepening into the inner life, learning a musical instrument, that kind of thing. They realised we can do it, but we don't do it. So this is a spiritual challenge to take on these questions of social justice, not in an abstract sense, but in how we make a rekindling of community with one another.
I appreciate you describing the spiritual challenge of this time because, of course, many people were deeply, deeply affected during this period. Liz, in particular, your husband became seriously ill with COVID right at the very start of the pandemic. That must have been very frightening for you and your family.
That was very frightening, partly because really at this time, this week 3 years ago, Angus, as a GP, as a very fit person, as a cyclist, suddenly became very ill with COVID. So it was an indicator that this wasn't an infection that was only infecting part of a community. This was an infection that was going through the whole of the community. It did affect all of us, and it also was a time when it really struck me how extraordinary the church was, how extraordinary our faith was, how people did come together to offer care, support, and to pray, to say this matters, we matter together. That was really strengthened me. It strengthened all of us, and it reminded us, I think, throughout the 3 years that a core part of, I suppose, our Christian faith, and the core part actually of all religions, is about the sense of compassion, to act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. It's a verse from Micah, but it really captures this sense of what it is to be part of a common humanity and be together.
So it very much restored your faith. I think it sounds very much like you were looking for light in the darkest time,
Yes.
which is what we're kind of discussing. I believe at the moment it's a very poignant discussion. And Alistair, something else in lockdown, of course, was that we weren't really travelling very far on cars or in planes. The industry was cut back drastically. As an ecologist, did you see that as a positive?
Oh, it was wonderful. We live just on the edge of Govan, and we're just a few miles from the airport. It all went silent. You could hear the bird song. There was a wonderful sense of ecology coming back into the community. And when I was asking folk at the Gal Gael the other night how it was for them, I was struck by one guy, because it wasn't all hard-pressed folk there. There were some folk from middle-class backgrounds like myself. And one guy said, the Botanic Gardens became an oasis. The Botanic Gardens in Glasgow were not closed, he said, and they were able to walk there. People nodded to each other. It formed a sense of human community out of the ecological community, which he said has carried on since then.
I just want to finally come to Christina and ask, from the study here, can you tell us about some of the main takeaway points for policymakers?
Yes, I think we've all been alluding to the crucial role of connections within communities, families, friendship groups, neighbourhoods, and so on. So I think this is relevant to policy because I think those sorts of networks really can be mobilised and resourced to provide a real buffer and a support to communities in times of hardship, and that has relevance beyond the pandemic. I'd also note the role of local government. So local government was often much more trusted than national government during COVID. And Alistair noted that the real disillusionment and scepticism and anger at central government, and that, the surveys suggest that really peaked actually after the Dominic Cummings incident, where it was emerged that he'd breached lockdown rules. And there's a lot of anger about that. So I think, just thinking about the role of local government and local communities and investing and connecting much better and resourcing local communities. And I think also related to that, and absolutely key, is this digital question. So we need to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be digitally connected, because that's such an important channel and means for us to stay together and work together and mobilise in situations like this.
Very meaningful and impactful conversation we've had with you this morning. My thanks to Alistair McIntosh and Professors Liz Grant and Christina Boswell. Now, one of the biggest day-to-day changes since the pandemic has been the way we work. Some offices have shut down altogether. Lots more people are working from home some of the time. And for anyone who is doing that, there is a constant juggle of work-life balance. So we'll be carrying on this conversation after a bit of music. It's the
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Gonna what? Around the clock. 3 years ago in St. Albans, Queens, I was rocking at a bar called 118. Little kids stood and watched as I rocked the spot. Didn't know years later I'd be standing on top. Live on Farmers Boulevard, I was born in Bayshore. Stop the rich and shake hands with the poor. And this is a story about a brother I know. God created all the fate out.
hearing a moment ago about some of the ways the pandemic has changed day-to-day life, and there's no doubt of its impact on how we approach work. 3 years after the first lockdown, working from home is now a permanent option for many people, with businesses fully embracing remote working as an alternative to traditional office-based jobs. For many people, working remotely can take a toll on mental health and well-being due to the lack of face-to-face interaction and socialising. However, people are finding ways to cope with these challenges by staying connected virtually. One technique is called body doubling, and it's been hitting the headlines recently. We'll hear a bit more about that shortly. But as we move into an era where remote working is a long-term option for many companies, it brings up questions around the future of work and how it will affect us in the long term. Joining me to give their insights is Dr. Kristen Knowles, who's an evolutionary psychologist and senior lecturer at Queen Margaret University, and CEO of Disability Equality Scotland, Lynn Parnaro. A warm welcome to you both.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Lovely to have you both with us. Kristen, let's start with you. You know, this is a new way of working right now, and it might feel like the norm for people who've been doing it for 3 years, but it's still uncharted territory.
Yes, I mean, I tend to look at human behavior with a long lens, right? Looking at our biological evolution over thousands and even millions of years. So, of course, as a species during all of our development, we've been evolving and communicating face to face, and being able to kind of work remotely, being connected online is still really quite new. It's really just in the last couple of generations that we've even really been able to kind of hit on this. And just recently, of course, during COVID, we were all kind of pushed into working at home, and we had to adapt with the technology rather quickly. So this is quite new for us. We're not necessarily sort of hitting everything that we need to with it to get the most out of our productivity.
I mean, obviously working from home is different for each individual person, with some who absolutely love it. And I guess there might be many who don't at all. In terms of, not having that daily socialisation, what then are some of the long-term complications that we're already seeing, and how has that impacted on the way that we look at work life? Kristen?
Yeah, I mean, the way that we are sort of most comfortable, I should say, communicating is to do so in a face-to-face way. But of course, there are people who are working at home and really getting on and finding themselves being more productive than ever. But I think what we missed, especially during the lockdowns, was actually seeing other people and feeling as if we're part of a team and a community. And I think we did quite well with the technology that we had to be able to kind of support us through that time. And it was certainly better than if we didn't have anything at all. But I think missing that kind of social contact, being able to even just look someone in the face and see their body language, we can try to kind of replace this with online working over Zoom or Teams, some kind of video chat, but kind of the more richness of communication has been lost a little bit with things like this. And I think it's really interesting to kind of think about, as we're moving back into maybe, working in the office and working at home and developing this kind of hybrid model, where the kind of lines are about what we really need about work, need from work when we go to the office, and what we need from our colleagues and the kindness of our colleagues, and being able to talk to people in person, in the flesh. We sort of realize, as soon as that's taken away, we start to realize how much we actually need it.
Lynn, I'd like to bring you in here. You're actually an early adopter of using something called body doubling long before it became a TikTok trend.
Yeah.
It might not be a term that many people have heard of, but they could be doing it without even realising. Can you tell us about it? What is it?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are using it more than they know. It's basically having someone sit alongside you, just as we were talking about there about return to the office and having that kind of accountability and connection to get stuff done. and we can all procrastinate. We can all, put things off that we don't want to do, or perhaps we feel a bit overwhelmed with everything that we've got to do. Having someone sit alongside you, not telling you what to do or watching you do it, but just having them work alongside you, gives you that connection and allows you to be more focused, be more productive, and of course then you mirror who you're working alongside. So if they're getting on doing their work and doing tasks that they need to do on a day-by-day basis, then it helps you and encourages you to join in and do yours.
And so what we're talking about here is an accountability partner in some respects. And I think anyone who has been involved in academic research might be familiar with the changes that can occur in participants then when they're being observed. It can potentially move people to action. But this process is about having someone on a screen in front of you. So having perhaps on Zoom or another platform or even on your phone. So they're watching you the whole time you're working. Is that really how it works?
It absolutely can be. It's not a case of watching you do the work as such. It's more just that accountability. So there's someone there to check in. How are you getting on? What are you working on now? Perhaps for some people it might be connecting with that individual in the morning or at the start of a session and kind of almost saying, right, this is what I want to achieve today. This is what I need to get done. This is what I want to focus on. So it's making, having that accountability partner there to say, is that being done yet? Or how are we getting on with that, as I said? And also to ensure that people are staying focused on task. Because we can all have all the distractions going on. We've got lots of things going on in our mind. When we're not physically in the room with someone, it's easy to start doing something else. So it's really just about keeping someone focused on a task that they want to achieve.
And so then how have you been affected by the use of body doubling? How has that benefited you and your team, especially during lockdown periods when it wasn't possible to be face-to-face?
Well, we're still all not face-to-face in our organisation because we're all across Scotland. And it's an opportunity then for us to kind of try and recreate a little bit of that working in the office alongside each other, focus in that way. So we can come together and we can share what we're working on that day. And we've got each other to check in on, whether that is on Teams, even just with a short message, or whether we hop onto Zoom and have that discussion. So what's missing, I think, working from home a lot is that kind of like brainstorming or I'm working on this, what do you think of that? If you've got any ideas of, that kind of thing. So this allows us then to come back and try and recreate it anyway.
And it's been proven to help people, particularly with ADHD. Why is that?
Those living with ADHD find a lot of people find focus really, really difficult. Attention span can be shorter, but also lots of ideas going on in an individual's head. So it's helping them focus down on what they want to achieve. So perhaps picking 2 things that they want to achieve in a session, however long that is, and almost setting timers to say, right, how long do we think this will take for us to achieve? Somebody might say, 10 minutes, I just want to work on it for 10 minutes. So it's like, helping that individual then set an alarm for the 10 minutes and say, right, how far have you got? Have you achieved it all, etc. And then it gives that sense of achievement. And it's one less thing that someone has to keep in their head, because sometimes it's about brain space rather than actual physically doing as such.
Kristen, what's the psychology around body doubling and why it might be a good tool to help people stay focused?
So I think the really interesting element of body doubling is where we can kind of look at neurological evidence to see where this could actually be helping, particularly as Lynn is talking about helping with attention and focus. So there's this idea that in the brain, we have something called our mirror neurons, and they literally help us mirror other people's behavior. So when we observe someone doing some kind of action, our brain is kind of already setting the patterns for us to do those things ourselves before we've even decided to do it. So I think there's this really interesting neurological connection that can really set a foundation for some of the effects that Lynn is talking about, which is really utterly fascinating. Another thing that Lynn has mentioned is this idea of having a sense of accomplishment. And when we think about this in an evolutionary context, right, what it would have meant to our ancestors to work together on a task and have a sense of mutual accomplishment would be really beneficial for any community who are living near one another. So in an evolutionary sense, this makes total sense, right? That we would be evolved to work on stuff together, right? It's probably why we enjoy things like working in the community, volunteering together, maybe joining an orchestra or singing in a choir. We have a sense of mutual accomplishment that brings a lot of well-being to our lives. So even if we take this outside of a working context, just in a living context, I think things like this can be really helpful.
Well, I certainly think the future of work is going to fascinate people for many years to come. We'll be continuously evolving and talking about it. But Lynn, just finally, for anyone who is struggling to work from home or feeling chained, to the desk, what are some of the top tips that you have for them to make it more productive and enjoyable?
So I think one of the things is to get away from the desk regularly. We hear that a lot now, people working from home, I'm just chained to my desk. Before, when we were in offices or, in work, we would be out and about, or we would get up to go to the photocopier or that kind of thing. We're not doing that when we're working at home. So that's my biggest top tip. Get away from that screen regularly and move around. Set yourself some tasks, look at do a brain dump, get it all out of your head, and then just pick one thing to work on. So often we're trying to multitask too much. Just one thing to focus on. And then, talk to a colleague, talk to a friend, and say to them, I want you to check in with me in like half an hour or at lunchtime, and this is what I want to have achieved. So hold yourself accountable, but to do that, you need sometimes someone else to hold you accountable too.
A brain dump. I very much like the sound of that. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Kristen Knowles and Lynn Parnaro. You're listening to Sunday Morning with me, Zara Janjua, and coming up at 10, both here on BBC Radio Scotland and on BBC One Scotland, is The Sunday Show with Nick Sheridan and Martin Geisler. And Nick joins me now to share with us what's coming up. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Zara. How are you?
Very well, thanks this morning. Nice to hear you.
Fantastic. Good to hear you as well. As always, a busy show to come, as you can imagine, Zara. It's been a momentous, febrile, frantic, frenzied 48 hours for the SNP and for Scottish politics as a whole. We'll be speaking to Mike Russell, who is now interim chief executive of the SNP as of yesterday, and also on the show, as well as Humza Yousaf supporter and Scottish Government Minister Neil Gray, MSP. We will look as well at what this week's budget means for Scotland, with Scotland Office Minister Lord Malcolm Offord, as well as this story that is just rumbling on for months and months now. It seems the two CalMac vessels, which are under construction on the Clyde, will sit in the yard for a while longer. So further delays were announced this week. We will hear from one Western Isles councillor who's calling on CalMac bosses to relocate to the islands. And we will, of course, be running through our Sunday papers with our guests, the editor of The Courier, David Clegg, consultant and commentator Talat Yaqub, and former SNP head of communications, Fergus Much. So all that and lots more on The Sunday Show with Martin Geisler and I from 10 o'clock.
It sounds like you have plenty to fit into your show later on this morning. Nick,
sure do.
Thank you so much.
And it's Mother's Day as well, Zara, so trying to get some prep done for that.
Oh yeah, don't forget your mother. Not today. Give her a shout out if you can.
Will do, thanks.
See you later, Nick. Now, as we continue to reflect on the last 3 years of the pandemic, a real positive has been a sense of openness about our mental health and well-being. Many of us will have conversations about it that we never would have had before while on long walks in the park or out in nature. The outdoors became a haven for lots of people, and I'm going to be chatting to author Catherine May after this to hear how...
No one
In 2020, writer Catherine May released a perfectly timed book, Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. It became a manual for many, a guide to navigate dark months where, without choice, people found themselves accepting a slower pace, connecting with the rhythm of the natural world and coorieing in. Now, 3 years on, she has a new offering. Enchantment Reawakening Wonder in an Exhausted Age seeks to find those small things that spark awe, magical moments that bring us a sense of connection to the world. So, as we emerge from the darkness and isolation of the past few years, how can we learn to engage with the world in a different way? A way that supports our minds and our souls. Catherine May joins us now. Hello, Catherine.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you with us. Now, next week marks 3 years since the beginning of the first COVID lockdown. How do you reflect on that time now?
Oh my goodness. It's really funny actually, because this week Instagram has been reminding me of the photos I was posting during that time, and I was like putting posters up to say how to wash your hands for 2 minutes by singing Frere Jacques and things like that. And do you know what? I don't think any of us have really processed what that time has done to us. I think we're fundamentally changed on a physical level and on a mental level. And I actually think now is the time that we need to really consciously begin to make space to understand the changes that it's made in our life, because some of them are without doubt negative. Some of us have got a lot more fearful, a lot more restricted. But at the same time, I think there have been positive changes too. And I think I'm one of the people who really got in touch with their yearning for a different kind of life during that time. And there's a reckoning that we need to happen. And that's a reckoning with grief as well, and some of the really dark things that happened. So my book is, hopefully like a challenge for us all to start to make that reckoning. But I do think it's incomplete.
It's nice to hear that you are both looking at the positives as well, because, for a lot of people, one of the things that has come up continuously is the effect on mental health and well-being. How did you find yourself navigating that for you and for your son?
It was mixed for me, without a doubt. I began feeling very positive, and I wanted to do something for my son that really gave him a toolkit of how to think about this time and how to frame it, really. But I found, as I record in the book, there's quite a funny moment in the book where I take my son to the woods to try and get him to think about what's about to happen, and he completely resists me. And as he does, and as children so often do. And in that moment, I realised that I had to let him find his way through this, and that my job is to watch it and respond to it rather than to sort of teach him it in a very didactic way. So, there was for me this real sense that this was a time that we could grasp to think about our purpose in the world, if you like. But I have to say that a few months in, despite being actually quite a solitary person, the lack of social contact and the lack of kind of things that randomise my day meant that I fell under this intense brain fog, where I felt like time was skipping and moving about. I couldn't read, which is the centre of all things for me, and I just couldn't think straight. So it had a very kind of complex effect on my mental state.
I mean, you just mentioned taking your son out to the woods, which I suspect children and maybe even all of us will respond to well, to be out in nature like that. So I want to dive a bit deeper into your new book, Enchantment, that can conjure up images of mystical woodland creatures. But what does it mean to you?
I love the word enchantment because it feels very ancient, but it also feels very contemporary. And it came to me because I realised how often we were talking about disenchantment, and this is a disenchanted age, without ever really thinking about what enchantment meant in the first place for it to be overthrown. And I wanted to go back to that. I wanted to get past the kind of rainbows and unicorns and think what it means to feel like there is a little bit of magic that's expressed through the world, however we perceive that and however we believe in it. But I also love the idea of enchantment as a spell that you can cast. So it's something that requires action from us. It's not something that passively comes to us, but something that we need to do and to engage with. And I think my conclusion really was that enchantment is a quality of attention and an ability to sink deep into the things that really matter to us.
Well, your book is certainly a different concept, a new way of thinking, and you've kindly agreed to give us a short reading, Catherine.
I certainly have,
So
yeah.
whenever you're ready, we would love to hear that.
Thank you. Enchantment came so easily to me as a child, but I wrongly thought that it was small, parochial, a shameful thing to be put away in the rush toward adulthood. Now I wonder how I can find it again. It turns out that it had nothing to do with beauty after all, not in any grand objective sense. I think instead that when I was young, it came from a deep engagement with the world around me, the particular quality of experience that accompanies close attention, the sense of contact that emerges from noticing. I worked hard to suppress all those things. I thought it was what I had to do in order to grow up. But enchantment cannot be destroyed. We just have to remember that we need it. And now, when I start to look for it, there it is, pale, intermittent, waiting patiently for my return. The sudden catch of sunlight behind stained glass, the glint of gold in the silt of a stream, the words that whisper through the leaves.
Catherine, thank you. It was incredibly beautiful, rhythmic, poetic and moving. You mentioned your childhood, and that was when enchantment came to you. Did you have to relearn the meaning of this as an adult post-pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it was a muscle that I hadn't exercised for a long time, and it had atrophied. And it was very hard to find it, first of all. You know, it felt like this very pale signal that I was trying hard to pick up, and I was straining after it. But actually, the more I practiced it, the easier it became for me to feel this sense of fascination and awe and wonder at tiny things. And I think what I've realized is that enchantment is different as an adult. Like, we learn it as a child, but if we don't keep practicing it, we lose it and it doesn't get a chance to develop with us. Because I think it's much more bittersweet as an adult, and that's part of our ability to hold a much more complex universe, and that's not a bad thing.
No, and faith was also something that you did explore, and I would like to touch on that briefly if we could. How did that feel to kind of be a bit vulnerable when you were exploring faith within the book?
Yeah, that's the hugely vulnerable part of it for me. It's not something I've ever really been comfortable talking about, but I had this insistent feeling that there was something more out there that I was desperate to engage with, but I kept telling myself that it wasn't for me. It wasn't something I could do. It wasn't the way that I behaved in the world. And again, with all that space opening up during the pandemic, I had no choice but to engage with it because it kept visiting me. And I think writing the book really helped me to explore that. It helped me to lay down my problems with it and the reasons why I was so resistant to this idea of God, and to think about the way that I could believe and that I could carry on engaging with it.
Well, Catherine May, it has been delightful to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and for the beautiful reading you gave us. It's given us certainly lots to reflect on. And that was Catherine May with an excerpt from her book, Enchantment, Reawakening Wonder in an Exhausted Age. It's published by Faber and Faber. Coming up after 9, we'll be celebrating Mother's Day. I'll be chatting to 2 mums, including our very own Connie McLaughlin, about how they have navigated the challenges of other people's opinions and perspectives to forge their own way as parents. Plus, you might have heard a lot of chat about Nepo babies. These are children of famous parents that have risen to fame themselves. It's often discussed in terms of actors and musicians, but how is this replicated in the world of work outside of those industries? And what can employers do to ensure that the doors are kept open to all? And I'll be learning about vloggers going viral for their acts of charity. We'll be discussing where the line is drawn, especially when helping those in need can turn a profit. Now though, let's catch up on the latest news, and taking us there, Human League and Don't You Want Me.
You were working as a waitress in a cocktail bar when I met you. can't believe it when I hear that you won't see me. Don't you want me? You know I don't believe you when you say that you don't need me. It's much too late to find. You think you change your mind? You'd better change it back or we will both be sorry. Don't you want me, baby?
On digital radio,
FM,
your smart speaker.
and on BBC Sounds.
We're gonna get on down now.
It's Sunday morning with me, Sarah Janjua. It's 9:05. Coming up this hour, we'll be discussing nepotism in the workplace. It came up in awards season as actor Jamie Lee Curtis mentioned her celebrity parents in her acceptance speech. But what does it look like out with the glitz and glamour of the film industry? Plus, a look at the influencers making videos about their acts of charity. And first of all, a very happy Mother's Day to all the mums. They come in many different forms. Some are blood, some are found, some are mother figures that we stumble across in life. After a bit of music, we'll be marking it by hearing about the challenges for mums who are being constantly bombarded about how to parent their children. Then after that, at around 9:20, we'll be diving into the BBC Radio Scotland archives. But first... significant and rewarding experiences in life. However, it comes with its own set of challenges to navigate, especially in this modern era where social pressures have increased significantly. Mothers today often face conflicting expectations and opinions telling them how they should raise their children. With the constant bombardment of facts, information and pressure to be the best, how does it impact mums today? And how has that changed across generations? Well, I'm joined by freelance journalist and TV reporter Nazanin Nazir. And we also have BBC presenter Connie McLaughlin, whose voice you'll no doubt be familiar with if you listen to the show on a regular basis. A warm welcome to you both.
Morning.
Lovely to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. Tasnim, let's start with you. As a mother of 5 children, with your oldest being 13, how different were your experiences with each child in terms of the anxiety or feeling overwhelmed with information? And has there been a shift in outside influences since you had your first child?
Yes, well, I mean, I definitely think there's been a shift throughout the years. I remember when I had my daughter, my first child. I mean, even when she was a newborn and I put her in the Moses basket, there'd be relatives who'd come over to visit and the aunties would readjust her in the actual Moses basket and say, oh, no, not this way, do it that way. And whilst, it may be well-intentioned and you do get people, who mean well, you do get others who can make new mothers, and I often felt that really feels quite small, especially when you think you know what you're doing. It can impact confidence. But over the years, actually, I found that, with social media and with the exposure of content, different content online, I personally have learned to be more assertive and more confident in my parenting. Mm-hmm. But I do know it can impact, people's mental health, people's well-being, and it certainly did impact me when I was a new mum because I felt a bit less confident when I thought I was doing well, and then, if you have somebody kind of coming in and saying, "No, actually, you've got to do it this way," you start questioning yourself.
Tasnim, it sounds like you've become a lot more confident, as you've mentioned, in your own parenting style. And with 5 children, is that right? You must feel different now in the way that you're approaching the youngest. Does the eldest ever mention the difference in the parenting style?
Funny enough, she doesn't seem to, she thinks I kind of try to treat my children all the same, and with the parenting style as well. It's been consistent with all of them throughout. So they all are kind of. I look after them all, the same way. But I would say my daughter definitely feels like with the younger one, I might give maybe some more leeway when he does these puppy eyes, I guess.
Oh, the youngest always gets away with everything. The youngest always does.
It's terrible, but it's amazing to see how they grow and their different personalities. Mm-hmm. But I think, as a mother, we do grow along with them, and we learn. I certainly learned as I went along.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an ongoing process by the sounds of things. And I want to come to Connie because, firstly, a huge congratulations. You have recently had your first child. How did you sleep last night?
Well, if I told you the secret that I'm actually still in bed right now, Zara, I bet you would be surprised about that. He's great. He's 7 weeks old, and he is the sort of textbook baby. And honestly, it's been such a whirlwind of a sort of almost 2 months that I don't know how qualified I feel actually about talking about motherhood, which I know sounds silly, but it's been such a sort of new experience for me that I don't even think I've got to that point yet where I've processed the fact that I'm a mum.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
You need the space and time to reflect a bit more, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, do you know what? Our mind is so clever at being able to keep us safe. And I think for me, not to make sure that I'm not overwhelmed, that it's almost like I'm sort of in the treadmill of it, and I'm sort of just going and each day is passing by, and we're doing really well and all the rest of it. Because I think if I thought really about the magnitude of what's just happened, I'm not really sure that I'm in a place to sort of deal with that right now. But listen, just listening to what your other guest was saying there about this idea of how the information that you receive, I think is really interesting, because I've not really necessarily felt that people have been bombarding me. I've not necessarily been looking too much on social media. And I don't know if that's because I'm a wee bit older. I mean, I was 40, or I am 40 right now since I've had Oliver. And I think that being a little bit older, you maybe know yourself a little bit better. Because I'm thinking about me, if I had my baby when I was 20, I'm not sure if I'd handle it in the same way. But I'm less likely to take on board what other people are saying, which I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But what I did find is that the difference in information that I got from the care team that I had in hospital, the midwives, the GPs and everything else, there was so much sort of conflicting information that I think if I hadn't done a little bit of due diligence myself beforehand, I would have been really confused. And I think that we need to be better at empowering the mum to make her own decisions and really trust her instinct and her gut so that if that happens in the future, they can then make the decision themselves about what's right for their baby. And that's one thing that was really, really, really loud and clear for me through this whole process of pregnancy and the birth.
Well, they say this latest statistics really show that there are more child-free women at 30 now than ever before. So it sounds like your experience of being an older mum might be something that is becoming more widespread, and that certainly will be in the future. But Tasnim, how much, Connie mentioned there her age and that maybe that helped her to navigate some of those external pressures. How much do you think that kind of played into your experiences of becoming a mother?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Connie. I was just nodding along there because actually when I had my first child, I was only 19. And I think that, that did play a significant role in me feeling a bit, my personality as well, feeling a bit less confident. I was only 19. I was kind of probably a baby myself, I suppose. And I just didn't know. It's the unknown, and I felt like I was looking for advice. Obviously, my mum did give me a lot of advice and was great, but she never overstepped those kind of boundaries. But unfortunately, in my case, it was the kind of external relatives and other aunties and things who would come over and give me that kind of pressure. But I totally agree that you do get conflicting advice, and it is so important for the mother to feel empowered in making her own decisions. And I think personally that over time, as I had my children later on, like well into my 20s and 30s, I think that actually helped me gain more confidence, and I did feel more empowered to actually say, you know what, I know what I'm doing now, and this is the way I'd like to do things. And obviously in a polite way, but it was hard at the beginning to say that, especially with my first child, and it was hard to kind of say that actually no, I would really like to feed her this way, or no, I do want to hold her, because I was often told, you know what, don't hold the baby too much, they're going to get used to the hand. But when they're crying and you're a new mum, you just feel like, oh, I just want to cuddle them, and we should be allowed to do that if it's a mother's instinct. We want to hold our baby a little bit longer. No one should, tell us that we shouldn't. And I think that it's really important to actually get that confidence, whatever age you are, and feel empowered to speak up.
Tasnim, I wonder how much how much culture might have influenced potentially what you were being told, and did you feel that faith in some way impacted on some of the advice that you were being given?
Oh no, I mean, I definitely agree about culture. I don't think it was a faith-based thing that impacted it, but definitely culturally, yes. I'm from a South Asian family, quite a big family as well, so generations and generations, they'll come with the aunties when a newborn baby's born. You get actually quite a lot of visitors, and then with it being a new mum, you feel like, oh, I just need some space to have a quiet moment. But then families don't want to kind of offend anyone, and they'll let people come in. And again, you see, at that time, when I did have my first child, I was living with my parents. Then me and my husband, when we got our own place, it was a different story, and I was able to have that space and not have, visitors come in like day 2 of having a newborn, which really did help.
Welcome to my world, Tasman. Welcome to my world.
Oh,
I think my visitors are just stopping, I think, now. Actually, I've got some coming today. But you're absolutely spot on, this idea of needing to be really clear with your boundaries and really clear with that space, I think, because you're so vulnerable at the beginning, and I think you need to just find your own feet and find your way. And I think Absolutely. And going back to that thing that I was saying earlier about the age difference and having confidence, maybe as you grow older, you maybe do have more confidence in that voice to say, well, actually, no, this is not a great time for me. Maybe we can reschedule something for next week or whatever, because every day at the moment is merging into the next. You're just trying to stay alive and keep your small person alive rather than make tea for people,
I mean, it does sound like an added pressure for you when you have a newborn to have plenty of visitors coming round. And I suspect that the role of your partner certainly can play into this and how you kind of navigate and negotiate some of those interactions. But just to kind of sit with that role of the father for a moment, Connie, why do you think society has a problem accepting fathers then as being primary caregivers or in actively supporting their partners in raising children through the journey?
Do you know what? That's such an interesting question, because my situation and my husband's is very sort of equal, and that's the message that we really are very strong in making sure that the message that we send to our son when he's older, that he doesn't see that there's one that's more important than the other. And he is, we share responsibilities, whether it's feeding, changing, looking after our son. And I think a lot of people actually, so I've gone back to work. So as I said, my little one's 7 weeks old. I went back to work after 4 weeks, mainly because I think thinking about it actually and reflecting on this even just now, because it's such a big change, the first thing that I'll always tend to do when there's a huge change is try and keep things as normal as possible, just so that you don't get overwhelmed. And for me, being at work and doing something that I love to do, let's be honest, neither of the three of us are do something that's really difficult. We're not down the mines, it's a fun thing that we do, that we have in terms of a job, and we're very lucky because of that. And so going and being back at work and being that version of me again, I think was super important to me, to make sure that I felt sort of just connected and had that thread back. It was
like a coping mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. And that was exactly, I think, what it's been like. So knowing that Kyle's there, my husband's there, meant that I could go off and do whatever I wanted to do and come back, and that there was no change to the baby's care. And I think that's really, really important for me. And a lot of people, though, have sort of, many people have sort of given this sort of raised eyebrow of, oh, you're back to work already, or your husband's taking more time off to look after the little one than you. And I think, oh my goodness, we're in 2023. This is surely the message that we're trying to send, which is, equality between masculine males and females, and the roles of masculine and feminine, mother and father. And I think that's really important for us. And I don't know, can you hear him in the background? He's with his dad right now, crying. Actually, not Kyle, the baby. That is.
Could be either way, to be honest, on a Sunday morning if you haven't slept.
He's in the background, but you can just excuse his noise for now.
Many mothers who take this active role in working and trying to establish more equality in the house, I think are responsible for passing down that tradition. They want their children to see that. Tasnim, just quickly, I'm going to come to you for a final thought and on this one in particular. Mothers do pass down traditions. As a practicing Muslim, how important was it to you to pass down traditions of your faith to your children, especially with Ramadan just around the corner?
It was really important, along the way to pass this down. In with me and my husband as well, he is very hands-on dad. So he cooks and he looked after the children when I would, go for a shoot, for example, over the years, and throughout my career as well, he's been very supportive. So I've been lucky in that way, I think, to have a husband who is supportive and who is very hands-on. But yes, definitely in terms of faith, I've always tried to instill those kind of values of caring for one another, and they get to see us during festivals. We make it really special for them with the presents and with the just family getting together and appreciating one another. I think that's really important. So faith has played quite a significant role throughout the years with my kids as well, but I just think it's not been, it is a main role within the family unit, like them seeing us pray and them just seeing me there, doing acts of kindness, which I really try to show my kids that it's important to be kind more than anything else.
Well, wouldn't that be a wonderful tradition for us all to establish in our families? Tasnim, best of luck with everything. And of course, for Ramadan next week, it begins. And also to yourself, Connie, I hope that you get some great night's sleep in the days that come. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks,
and have
Anna.
a lovely Mother's Day. That was Connie McLaughlin and Tasnim Nazir sharing their experience of modern motherhood. Now, coming up, while many might feel that charitable acts should be performed quietly, influencers are racking up views on their videos, ranging from giving meals to the homeless to handing over millions to those in need. Why does this make so many of us uncomfortable? Plus, nepotism is everywhere. Whether you've been hearing talk of so-called nepo babies in the film industry of late, or excitedly awaiting the return of the TV series Succession, which tells of the powerful Roy media family. So how can people challenge that and ensure that everyone has a fair crack at their career? That's coming up after this from...
I'm missing you. Oh, who would have known that you'd have to go so suddenly, so fast? How could it be that our sweet memories would be all that we have left? And now that you're gone, every day I go on, but life's just not the same. I'm so empty inside, and my tears I can't hide, but I'll try to face the pain, though I'm missing you. I'll find a way to get through. Living without you, 'cause you were my sister, my strength,
Now, this month we're marking 100 years of broadcasting in Scotland with some gems from the archive. Here's BBC presenter and broadcast historian Graham Stewart.
100 years of our BBC in Scotland.
Now, here's one of the oddities of Scottish broadcasting during the Second World War.
BBC Home Service, up in the morning early. This time, it's physical exercises for ladies.
Good morning, everyone. Will you get your chair and stand with your left side towards the back of it and your left hand on it?